Her 9000's Game Room.
Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master, which was released in Japan as the Super Shinobi 2, is a hack and slash action game which was both developed and published by Sega for the Mega Drive, or as our American cousins would call it, the Genesis. It was released in 1993. It's a direct sequel to the previous Shinobi title, The Revenge of Shinobi. The game was originally intended to be released in 1992, but unusually for games from this sort of time period, it was delayed a little over half a year, finally being released in July 1993. Back in the day, video game production was generally measured in months, so this was a heck of a delay back then. The changes to Shinobi 3 during this delay were quite drastic. A prototype has found its way onto the internet which shows a very different game, a game which would go on to be redesigned almost from scratch. The original version of Shinobi 3 is thought to have been almost complete and was apparently previewed by gaming publications back in the day. I have even heard rumours that it might have even got to the stage where some magazines had written reviews for it. Some of the original version's ideas were clearly brought forward into what became the final game, but judging from the leaked earlier prototype, which I've been showing you so far in the background of this review, things could have been very different. Okay, so let's move on now to the actual Shinobi 3, as you'll see I have in the footage. Okay, so what's the plot of the game? Well, you take on the role of Joe Musashi, probably butchering that pronunciation, who is a ninja whose mission is to stop an evil organisation called Neozed. You do this by making your way through 7 levels full of enemies, dispatching them with your moveset, a moveset which includes shuriken throwing knives, katana strikes and magical ninjutsu powers. All of these were present in the last Shinobi game, but now you can also sprint, allowing you to close the distance between you and your enemies quickly, so you can dispatch them with your sword attack. You can also perform an airborne kick to dispatch enemies from above, and you've gained the ability to block incoming projectiles by holding down the attack button. You have also gained a wall jump to gain access to higher places, which in places gives this game a sort of Ninja Gaiden-like sprinkle of spice. All in all, this makes you feel like the game has a very varied moveset, one which has had lots of things added to it which allow you to play the game at a much faster pace than its predecessor. So now I've mentioned what you can do in the game, I suppose I should comment on how the game feels. Well, I mostly find the controls for this game very smooth. You can do pretty much everything you want to do, easy with one exception, and that is the rolling jump which pushes you higher in the air. This thing seems to just not want to work sometimes, whereas other moves such as the wall jump and the dashing seem easy and smooth to pull off first time every time. This does not. This is not a game breaking bug, it's just a minor annoyance I have. Sure, it's cost me a life or two here or there, but as the game is a fair degree easier than previous entries in the Shinobi franchise, and is also a joy to play, it's not something I can be overly harsh about. Shinobi 3 does feature some genre cliches such as a factory-based level, a military-based level, but it also does offer up some lesser used ideas. For example, round 2 begins with you riding a horse and fighting ninjas, which although reminds me of the start of the 1991 Amiga game Wrath of the Demon, so not being totally original, I would argue it was done very well here, and it's a far from common game-based occurrence. Round 4 puts Joe on a surfboard, reminding me of the surfing in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. And if your game is getting compared to Turtles in Time, it's never a bad thing. This game does a good job of putting in these neat little different parts to help keep things fresh. Something it also does with the enemies in this game, you'll never find yourself going, oh great, there's the 4 millionth soldier I've dispatched in a row. Which can help games like this to feel less of a drag if you're always seeing something a little different now and then. The game has bright varied graphics with a lot of attention to detail, and everything moves so smoothly. This is met by what I consider to be an overall good soundtrack, with certain tracks being in my opinion nothing less than perfect, both in terms of fitting the action and pace of the gameplay, but also in just being darn good pieces of music in their own right. The game's length is just about right in my opinion, but I also find it almost infinitely replayable, because it feels like it has such a spring in its step. The pace is just perfect and you always feel like you can improve and handle things better every time you play the game. I also just find it a really comfortable game to pick up and blow through the first few levels on when I have nothing better to do. If I was going to give this game a score, I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10. If you're new to the world of Shinobi, I'd probably call this game the perfect entry point for you, as it's a lot easier than some of the other games in the franchise, without it, in my opinion, feeling any weaker for it. An interesting point to note is that there was a very good conversion of it on the 3DS, which did all kinds of little quality of life improvements, giving you a button so you could use your sword whenever you want instead of it being only used when you were close to enemies, giving block a button of its own instead of holding something down, and it might be worth grabbing this before the 3DS shop actually closes, depending upon when you listen to this review. Failing that, you could always hack your 3DS, add it, and if you really want to give Sega some money, you could buy Shinobi 3 on Steam. Okay, that's Kerr9000 signing off saying keep on playing those games.